Hey everybody, welcome, and thank you for listening to this episode of Marriage Therapy Radio. My name is Zach Brittle. I'm here today with Casey Davidson and Mike Davidson. They are a really cool couple. I enjoy talking to them. Casey has a podcast called the Hello Someday podcast for sober, curious women. I'm actually going to be on that in a couple weeks, so this may be a little bit of like part one of two, but we didn't organize it that way. I just wanted to talk to them about their story and kind of how they make it work, in particular around Casey, who is alcohol-free, and Mike, who's not, and what their journey was like and how that feature of their relationship has challenged and also encouraged them. And I think a lot of you are going to listen to this and hear the sound of your own voice, which is always cool. And if you do, you should check out Casey's podcast. Again, I'm going to be on that in a couple of weeks. But that's all we have going on for now. This is a very cool conversation. Stick around. How you doing?
Good. You're Seattle-based, right? Or somewhere around here?
Yeah, you too, right? Where are you?
Redmond. What about you?
I'm in North Seattle. So sorry that you have to hang out with me at 1 o'clock on the sunniest day of the year so far, I guess. It's a nice one, but hard to be stuck inside when you only get so many of these every once in a while.
Yeah. Well, it's good. Happy to be here.
I have this really enormous privilege of talking to a lot of different kinds of couples about how they make their relationship work. And most people don't have that. Most people have their parents, maybe their friends, maybe 5 couples that they look at and go, oh, that's how relationships work. And so I've just sort of decided I'm going to have my listeners get to hear from a bunch of different couples about how they make relationship work. And I interviewed my parents a couple weeks ago. The next episode that'll come out before yours is a couple of 18-year-olds.
Really?
I've had people from all over.
Did you say 18-year-olds?
18, yeah. They're not married, but they're just okay. They're just trying to figure out how to do relationships. And I was like, what do you know that I don't know? Like, because I don't know if you hear this, but like in my couples practice anyway, people come back and say, I just wanted to go back to the way it was when we first met. And I was like, oh, what's that like?
Yeah.
When was that? It was 30 years ago. Well, lots changed in 30 years. So
yeah.
What's up with you guys? Tell me your story, or not story, but who are you? Just so that our people can find out. I got your bios, but you have a unique journey of your own. How would you describe it in an elevator speech?
Let's see. We met in the first job we both had after college. We both ended up in Washington D.C., a town neither of us was particularly from, and we worked together. We worked together for maybe 3 years, and we're dating for maybe 2 of those.
Yeah.
And I decided that the job wasn't for me anymore. We were management consultants and competitive intelligence. It was an interesting job, but not really a life's work.
Yeah.
And I said, hey, I want to go do something else. I've never really spent any time west of the Mississippi, but I'm moving. Do you want to come?
And you're together how long at this point?
We'd been dating for maybe 2 years.
Yeah.
Okay.
And she said yes. And so we took 10 days and auditioned cities on the West Coast. We spent like 3 days in Seattle and San Francisco and San Diego. And I voted for San Diego and she voted for Seattle.
Did you do that thing where you compromised and then went to Seattle?
Not quite. Kind of.
Well, she made the point that she had actually found a job and they were going to move us out there, and I hadn't done shit.
Yeah.
So we went to Seattle.
Is that your thing? Like you, just if I interpret what you just said, like you're kind of clear about what you don't want, but maybe less clear about what you do want, and then Casey, you're more of like I know what I do want, and you go get that thing.
Yeah, I think in this case, it more played into her like deep seated fear of ending up homeless and destitute.
Okay,
right, and so there was going to be I think I'm more comfortable without a full plan sometimes than she is.
Yeah,
I like things very comfortable and not a lot of change. And so it was definitely a leap of faith to leave my job and move somewhere new.
Yeah.
When we visited cities, the big pull towards Seattle was it was 2000. There were tons of jobs. It's a gorgeous city.
Yeah.
It felt like a lot of young couples doing a lot of outdoorsy things. So that was a huge draw. second draw is my very best friend from boarding school lived here.
Okay.
And so we stayed with her and her boyfriend. They lived on a floating home in Lake Union and had a fantastic time. And I was just like, I want to live in Seattle. And so, Mike initiated the move. I decided to take a leap of faith. And then I was like, I am going to control everything I can. So I think before he updated his resume, had put out all the job resumes, gotten 8 interviews and 2 job offers, and they offered to move us out there. So I was like, all right, to throw it back to you, yeah. I'm moving. Are you coming with me?
We got here in 99, so we've all been here about the same time, and it's changed a lot. This town has changed a lot.
Oh, so much. Yeah. But it was really fun. We ended up finding a floating home to rent on Lake Union that was a mile from my best friend. And we lived on floating homes for 3 years when we were 25 years old. I mean, it was epic and awesome and lovely.
What was that? That was Sleepless in Seattle. Tom Hanks lived on this.
Exactly.
Is that where you lived?
Yeah, we were on Lake Union and then Portage Bay on this really cool 600 square foot floating home. We got kayaks and could, take a couple strokes and the whole city was lit up in front of you. And it was lovely.
Yeah. Yeah. It sounds like it. And so you've been here, I guess, let's see, 25 years.
Yeah.
And what are you doing now? Like you came out here for a job and are you each in those jobs still? Or are you doing new things?
Yeah, I bounced right into sort of the .com world that was a little unstable in the 2000s. So got on a .com right before it IPO'd, and within a year they laid off 70% of their people, including me. The bonus was they had a lot of money, so they gave me 5 months off plus unemployment. And then I moved. I mean, I probably worked at 7 companies in my time here. I worked in digital marketing at a bunch of big companies, a bunch of small startups. And then 5 years ago, I quit drinking almost a decade ago. I decided to start my own coaching practice. So I'm a sober coach for women and I host a podcast. And I've been doing that for 5 years.
Yeah, that's very cool. And I'm coming on your podcast. Is that right?
Yes. Yeah. We're talking on the 28th. That's really
great.
excited.
We'll make it like a part 1, part 2, because I'm interested in your story. I also quit drinking only about 5 years ago. Not only. Only.
Yeah, that's a good stint.
I don't know if that's the right word, but like I don't even think about it anymore. It's like, it's sort of like, it just is a thing that I am right now, not even a thing I did. But, and then Mike, what are you up to?
I've had a couple of jobs when we first got out here. I worked for the Mariners for a while, security during the season.
As a catcher. You should say I should work for the Mariners as like a catcher or like a designated hitter.
Yeah, no, I was, for a season, I was the guy that jumped out of the stands in between innings right field to make sure nobody ran on the field.
The year that they were really good.
That year they won 116 or something?
Yeah.
I was down there for a couple of those games. Okay, I actually, sidebar. What's your job? What is those guys? What are you supposed to do? You just stare at stuff? Like it's like you don't smile, you don't turn your neck, you just like make sure you just look intimidating.
Yeah, you're basically just a deterrent to somebody who.
And then you got to run fast.
It's going to jump on the field. I never got to actually chase anybody down and tackle them and all that.
That sounds amazing.
The more fun job I did was working alcohol enforcement. It was you and a partner, and you'd get sent out somewhere by the eye in the sky, and you were basically small town cops for this city of 45,000 people, all of whom were in one of their bigger drinking days of the year.
Yeah.
So there were always stories to tell on those nights.
Yeah, I bet. And so now you're doing what are you doing?
So, that wasn't very long. I took a job in 2001, teaching 6th grade, at an independent school, in Redmond. And I've been there ever since. So I taught 6th grade for a bunch of years. I was a high school dean of students, and I've been a middle school principal now for a decade.
Yeah. So you're like Mr. Davidson.
I'm Mr. Davidson.
And
now.
A coach.
And a coach, yeah. I coached varsity basketball. I've coached varsity baseball now for last year was my 24th season.
I love it. I
And
love it.
so, yeah, I found that life's work that I was looking for originally.
That's the coolest. And it's a pretty far away from being a management consultant in, what'd you call
Yes,
it?
it is.
Intelligence or something?
Yep.
That's insane. I was just in DC a couple weeks ago. It's a cool town. My daughter's actually walking around Washington, DC right this second. In fact, she is at the...
Doing the fine by?
Yeah. I'm like, where is she at?
We have a 17-year-old son, and, he's obviously getting independent. So he's wandering around and seeing all his friends. And we basically are like, oh, he's at this restaurant. Oh, he's at this house.
She is on the mall right this second, about to walk past the White House. You have children, 17, and then a couple that went to camp.
17 and 11, 17-year-old boy, 11-year-old girl.
Yeah. How's that?
Great.
Yeah, they're good kids.
They're really good kids. We got lucky.
I get the neat experience of, they both now go to the school where I am.
Oh, right on.
So I've gotten to be a part of our son's journey, seeing him at school every day since the 5th grade. And now the same for our daughter, which is pretty unique, kind of special thing to be tuned into them that way.
Yeah. Mike, are you alcohol free?
No.
Okay. And so I'd love to hear about that for you guys. Like, what is that story, and how do you knit it together? Particularly, Casey, if it's part of your like kind of identity and your stake in the ground. Like, how do you guys do that? Or how do you talk about it?
Absolutely. Well, I know from reading your bio that your wife is also alcohol free now. Is that right?
Now. I mean, we had the last 5 years have been a real sort of collaborative process in that, because I have I started about 2 years before she did. And so, they're not quite overlapping, and they're different, very, very different styles of sobriety journeys, like extremely different. So, I'm always curious about it. And then, part of what I want to hear about from you guys is that I actually think that quitting drinking was pretty easy for me. It was easier for me than it was for her. But then I also realized that alcohol wasn't my drug of choice. My drug of choice was far more relational. It was anger, it was resentment. And so I've spent more time in recovery from anger and resentment than from alcohol, or maybe less time, because I quit drinking before I quit being angry. But anyway, we have a whole narrative about and around that, that I'm more than happy to share, but it's also not my, I want to hear from you guys too. Yeah. Maybe I'll tell you on when I come visit you.
Yeah, that would be amazing.
Yeah.
So, I mean, when we met, I was a big drinker, always was a lot of, so I went to college. I played college rugby, which was a master class in problematic drinking habits. I mean, I was sort of the like gold star girl who got straight A's and then got blackout drunk after rugby parties and at keg parties. I found that it really shut off my mind, and it was really fun. And I was, always very concerned about how I presented and whether people liked me, and overthought everything. And, it was sort of a feature, not a bug, that if I drank enough, anything could happen. And I took that into my first job out of college. My parents were foreign service officers overseas. They had a ton of dinner parties, and neither one of them struggled with alcohol, yet a bottle of wine was on the dining room table every single night. Every party was cocktails. And I thought that's what adults did. So when I graduated college, I just started that on my own. And I was a terrible cook. So now I'm an adult, I would literally eat Lucky Charms for dinner with a big glass of red wine. I mean, it was ridiculous. But I was a 7-night-a-week drinker and sort of varied what I drank based on my time in life. Met Mike, they hired 30 kids right out of college at this consulting firm. We had a huge group of friends. We went out drinking at bars. We went out on whitewater rafting trips. We went on ski trips. So I was always a drinker, and Mike drank too. He didn't ever drink like I did. I just, at some point later in life, Mike said to me, you drink until it's gone or until you pass out. And
so
I'm
it's gone or you're gone. Yeah.
Yeah, pretty much. And it was sort of like, for a long time, it was just like, you knew who you married, right?
Mm.
And it was fun. I was, what I would say is I was a happy drinker. When I had enough, I would sort of like fade into the background, smiling quietly,
Mm.
and go to sleep, AKA pass out.
Yeah.
But I was, really still very responsible. Mike always drove. It was like unspoken that he would be driving home anywhere we went. But I was always like, the coffee is made, the kids are set, the groceries are bought. I have 3 alarms set for the morning. I woke up at 5:30 to do boot camp. And yet I was going through life with a hangover and a headache and sort of crushing anxiety that for a long time I did not realize was related to my drinking. I was waking up at 3 a.m., but also clueless, when you're in your 20s and 30s, thinking it's work stress, and sort of was trying to solve for all of the not symptoms, but repercussions from drinking without giving up drinking. So I would go to therapy and I would work out and I would say I needed sleeping pills, and yet never really looked at my alcohol consumption other than I need to drink less and moderate.
Yeah.
And so I spent years making all the rules, like I'm only going to drink 2 drinks a night, or I'm only going to drink when I'm home, so I won't drive, or I'll only drink when I'm out, so it won't be as often. And was never very successful for very long. And all my friends, I had a bunch of really successful female friends who were really tight, and we did a ton of stuff together, and we all were pretty big drinkers. And so it felt very normal to me, every happy hour, every kid play date, every, camping trip, it was always a ton of wine. And what's interesting is that I never told Mike how worried I was about my drinking ever. I was pretty, quiet. I was pretty defensive about it. I didn't want him to know how much I struggled with like worrying about my drinking, feeling hungover in the morning, trying to control it, saying, forget it, I'm fine, justifying it. And so, it was more subtle, where in the morning, sometimes he'd be like, so how are you feeling? And I'd be like, I'm fine.
Yeah. What do you mean?
Yeah. And like, because everything else was I was getting promoted. I had a ton of friends. Was taking care of my kids well. I literally at one point told my therapist, I am only hurting myself, like I'm keeping all the balls in the air. And yet it was just this huge backpack of rocks I was carrying around. And for many, many years, I was like, I need to get this under control so that I never have to stop, because stopping drinking was my worst case scenario. I had all these fears about I'd never have fun again, and I would spend the rest of my life isolated and bored. And what if I stopped drinking? People would think I had a problem with alcohol. So it was in my mind. I want to hear from you what your experience was. I stopped for 4 months when I was 38. My son was 5. He was an only child at the time. I actually did go to Alcoholics Anonymous for 4 months. It wasn't my path. It didn't fit with what I wanted. But I also got pregnant with my daughter 4 months in. And so I sort of did the slow shuffle away from like nothing to see here. I'm better. I'm happier. Not realizing that I was better and happier because I had taken alcohol out of my life. Our marriage is better. I'm better at work. I'm more calm. I'm more emotionally stable. Like, therefore, ... I can drink again.
Yeah. Because
it was situational. Lila was born, and pretty quickly I was like, hey, I'd like a glass of wine on a date with Mike. And he seemed to be totally fine with that and somehow not raise any eyebrows, even though I'd been to Alcoholics Anonymous. He thought my impression was that you thought I was overreacting going to it. And we can talk about that. And then, it's really easy to then be like, it's a Friday night. Why don't you pick up a bottle of wine? And then pretty easy for me to pick up wine when I went to the grocery store. And pretty quickly I was back to 7 nights a week drinking. And pretty quickly I was a bottle of wine a night girl. So for some reason in my mind, it was totally normal to drink a bottle of wine 7 nights a week. But it was only when, I opened bottle 2 that it was like, okay, this is going to be a hard day the next day. And so they always say like recovery ruins you for drinking. The entire time I was drinking, the second time, I knew it was a problem. I knew it was unsustainable. I knew I was going to have to give it up. And the question in my mind was just, can I play this out for a couple more years before I really have to stop? And it was sort of the death of 1,000 cuts. I was in a bunch of online sober groups, but I was drinking, so I didn't share. And then one morning at 3 a.m., I was scrolling through the feed. Someone way braver than me was posting about like, I have another day one. And in the comments, someone suggested a sober coach that I knew about, that I'd heard about many times. And I went into work that day, just a random Tuesday, and signed up for her 100-day challenge and emailed her 5 days a week, 7 days a week, slowly built up 7 days and 30 days and 90 days, and never went back. I felt so much better. But I, even at that time, didn't tell Mike anything more than I'm doing 100-day alcohol-free challenge as a health kick. Didn't tell him I had a sober coach. Didn't tell him I joined an online group that was called Hip Sobriety School. And so that was interesting. But let's go to whatever Mike's experience was. That was me.
What's the question again?
And that was a decade ago.
Well, what was it like for you? I mean, again, I've been married to my drinking buddy. I got sober. My drinking buddy got worse. I had to be the normie in the relationship with the person who wasn't pulling it together. And I got stories I could make up about how you experienced Casey's journey, but how did you experience Casey's journey? Like, what was it like for you to be alongside that?
Yeah, certainly, we were in our mid-20s when we met, right?
Yeah.
And so, alcohol was just part of the social scene. It had never been I was always a social drinker, even to this day. I think probably one of the great annoyances for Casey about me is I can open up a beer at dinner and it's still kind of kicking around in different places, like throughout the night, right? I might polish it off 4 hours later.
Yeah.
Forgets about it on the kitchen table. I'm like, who does that? There was never a moment that I did not know where my wine glass was.
Yeah.
And so, right. So that, that part of the, where she hit the brakes, after the car runs into the wall sometimes. Right. I was, always kind of, hey, in an hour, here's how I'm going to feel. So, all right, I'm going to back it down. I don't know. One of the things I think that always made us work was that we're not very judgmental of each other. Right. We try to be very careful about that in terms of things that don't directly, impact us. Right. That maybe would be better for somebody else to do that way. But try really hard to not say, hey, I just want to point out this thing that's wrong with you. Right.
Don't do that.
And, so pointing out some of the drinky things would be like, hey, would be the equivalent of, hey, you might want to go to the gym more. Right. It was in that same category of, rudeness almost in a way. Right. That here was this part of who somebody is, how she kind of, saw herself, what she found to be, what entertaining or self-soothing or whatever. Right. And it was only my problem on the somewhat infrequent, events where, I had to pick up the slack, as a result. I think probably the older we got, those probably got more frequent. Part of that shift, you're like the way it hits you the next day is different in your 30s than it is in your 20s. And so
2 kids, when I stopped drinking, we had a 2-year-old and an 8-year-old.
Yeah.
So if I was useless, a lot more fell onto Mike, right?
Yeah. That's like a lot of things when you have kids, right? I mean, there's this certain, kind of competence pact you make with each other when you have kids, right? You're going to be at the right place at the right time, and you're going to pull your weight. And, the same ways that if you were late getting home from work before kids, you weren't too worried about it. But once you got kids at daycare, you can't get away with that anymore, because it's not just you, right?
Just to be clear, though, I never didn't show up.
This was me when I was late to pick up the kids, right? Same deal.
Seriously, I was very, very careful about that.
Yeah. Well, once you have kids, before you have kids, sometimes there's things that are your thing and my thing. And then you have them, and there's this big bucket of things that are our thing now. And so one of the things that I always found really attractive about Casey was her general level of competence. And I think probably, that went both ways, right? In a relationship, right? The number of things you're like, I don't really know, like that's on you. I think is a real anchor on a relationship. So I think we both try pretty hard to not do that, right? I was reading an article a couple of weeks ago. I guess we both read it about man keeping, right?
And in the New York Times.
This idea that there's these, helpless man babies out there that their wives have this entire other job of maintaining their lack of emotional maturity,
but man keeping.
Yes.
Got it.
And that's so, when she would make the decision to say, stop drinking, right? I just never really thought of that as too much of, it's not that it wasn't my business, right? But for me to sanction it or not, right? That it would be the same as changing an eating habit or anything else, right? Like, sounds good. But it's not for me to say like, that's okay with me or not. And it helped that she never, demanded, except when she was really trying to get going, that I change my habits as a result of it. I ended up, her vice was wine, red wine in particular. So I gave up wine, which I'd only really pretended to be a big fan of because that's what she liked. And we had vacations for years that were built around going to wine areas or whatever. And I was always pretty ambivalent about it.
Every anniversary wine tasting,
It sounds pretty
fun.
zen.
Right. It took you to neat places and got to hang out together. So, that was the one thing that I did. I don't drink wine myself anymore. Certainly have it in the house.
To this day, we don't have wine in the house. Like, just because I'm like, I don't drink it. And if people come for a party, I sort of say, okay, here's what we have, where he drinks beer. Totally fine with that. That never was a big issue for me. But if people are coming, I'm like, we'll have beer, we'll have non-alcoholic beer, we'll have all these other just options. And if you want anything else, BYOB. So people will bring wine. And then when we're done, I'm just like, hey, I'm not going to drink this. Why don't you take it home with you?
Yeah.
And that's worked really well for us.
Yeah.
Yeah. And, just in general, I mean, I get asked this sometimes, friends or whatever, right? How was it for you? And, I think one of the things we've been good at in our relationship is the idea that people get to continue to evolve, even after you get married. And the idea that you're going to continue to be the same person forever that you were when you were, 28 or 23 or whenever when we got together is pretty limiting. I don't know, we were pretty unfinished products then. And so, her desire to first change that habit in her life. And then later, she left her job and started a whole business.
Yeah.
That kind of sprung from the what she'd experienced and the idea she could do well by somebody else and have this, what I'd had for years, right? This kind of life's work where I get to help somebody, totally. With my day, right? Like, hey, great, go for it. I need you to do what makes you happy.
I guess I have this question because it sounds remarkably zen. It's kind of the experience of like, I'm just married to this lady and she had her way of being on the planet and that was okay. And that's how it went. And have you guys, or how would you describe your relationship over the last 10 years? Is it better than it was the 10 years before that? Is it the same? Are you still like, it's okay. Now I'm married to a lady who doesn't drink and she actually helps other people who don't drink? Or do you guys have an experience of, no, this changed the way we do marriage.
Yeah. I think personally we'll take turns. For me, I think it's better for sure. I mean, when we were young, we had so much fun. I mean, we would go kayak camping and like bring all the beers and wines, and we would go on great vacations, and it was really fun. And I always think of that as like my drinking highlights, right? Like there were good times. I think it's to some extent disingenuous and to be like, oh, it was all terrible. It was really fun. And then it became more and more of a coping mechanism as I got older, where I was drinking, because it's addictive. And the more you drink, the more you're going to want to drink. It was definitely a habit for me, but it also became something I was very worried about, and something that, definitely impacted my mood. When I was trying not to drink, I was irritable. When I was drinking, I was sort of in my happy dopamine buzzy place for 2 hours, and then slept terribly, and then woke up with anxiety and woke up thinking, what the hell's wrong with you? Get your life together. And all of this was very secretive, right? I didn't want him to know, mostly because I was worried that if I tried to stop and didn't, he would be watching me for the rest of my life. We lived together, and I didn't want him to shift into that like paternal judgment role. I also just didn't want anyone to know how worried I was about it, or how much I thought about it, or how much I struggled with it. So once I stopped drinking, a lot of that went away. Right. So after 30 days, I remember asking him, I think we all have fears about what life without alcohol will be like. And after 30 days, I was like, what do you think? Because I was worried I was boring. We hadn't gone on any dates. We'd done different dates. We'd gone to the park and read books. I mean, it was almost like we were in our early 20s again without a lot of money.
We were in our teens again before you could.
We went to coffee shops and listened to live music. You had to be creative. We went to the movies, when you're used to doing like pub crawls in bookstores. So, I was worried he thought I was boring. And what's interesting is, I don't know if you remember it, but what you said to me was that what he noticed was our household was a lot more peaceful. And it was, I used to come home and, just be all riled up about things that had happened at work, or very stressed, or outraged by some slight to someone. In my mind, it also was like I was gearing up to drink, right? Oh, I deserve this. My life is so hard. This is my one reward. And then afterwards, I stopped drinking, and I feel very lucky that I had the support of a coach and a group, and I could work through all of that cravings and triggers and fears with people who got it, and people who were ready to support me. So I didn't lay that all on him, but he would be like, how's work? And usually it would be this whole like, oh, this deadline. And I was like, it was fine. And he's like, fine? And I was like, yeah, I went to a couple meetings. This part was good. This part's behind. Got a latte, went for a walk. And he was like, what? Because I used to be just drama. So I learned to switch what I thought was boring for actual peace and contentment, which was pretty cool.
Is that new information for you? Or
no, not all of it. I mean, some of the way, it's always interesting to hear your spouse talk about how they perceived you, responding to things. What came out of it was, the gaps are always where you're not particularly honest with each other, right? And so, what I came to understand was that her drinking was causing a lot of things that were actually, I think, underlying turbulence in the relationship. That wasn't necessarily about the drinking itself, right? Like she carried a ton of shame about it, right? And that presents in certain ways, right? Not saying that I'm, feel ashamed about it, but it comes out in these weird ways. She had a ton of anxiety, I think, about it. I think she was sleeping crummy, right? All the things that that get in the in the way of, life and communication and all of that, I didn't necessarily know what the cause was, or even that there was a different way of being until she stopped drinking, which I think, besides not drinking, she just, got to the root of a whole bunch of other things through your coaching and whatever else about feeling at peace with yourself. Right.
I started going to therapy weekly. I got on some anti-anxiety meds that I had gone on and off for years, but they actually worked when I wasn't, ingesting a bottle of wine every night. I felt more proud of myself. I didn't avoid his eyes in the morning, when you're hungover and your eyes are bloodshot and you feel like they're like, oh, how are you feeling? I didn't look him in the eye. I was very busy. I was very stressed about getting the kids to daycare. I was trying to move really fast so he couldn't look at me too closely.
Yeah.
And all of that kind of went away once I stopped drinking and started, saying, actually, here's what I need. And actually, I'm really tired, or I need some time to myself. I mean, all the coping tools that you actually realize you need to develop when you're not numbing out. You actually have to express how you're feeling and figure out what you need that is not knocking yourself unconscious with alcohol.
Yeah.
So I think it made us a lot closer.
Yeah, and there was a whole honesty barrier, right? Or just a lot of things you weren't honest about, why you were feeling a certain way, or, there are a lot of times that my assumption was you were probably upset with me about something when you're upset with yourself about something. And so the honesty level has gone up, not just in like this particular area, but I think in some other areas too. You're just not quite, you can get in a habit of being not dishonest with each other, but not truthful either about here's where I am, here's how I'm feeling. Right. And she didn't want to say I'm hungover. Right.
Yeah.
So it was something else.
Stressed, right?
And so you're peeling through this kind of all these little, lack of truths. And then you can just interpret those however you want. Right. Which is usually wrong and catastrophizing. And so, and the other, I think, thing that changed was she's always been a good mom, but she became a much more deliberate, force, especially in times like the evenings. Yeah. When, right. Like, a lot of, my big thing that always used to upset me was when, she'd fall asleep on the couch and it was my job to like get her up, but she, get her to bed and whatever else. And, that became a lot of like, hey, make sure my job was kind of make sure the kids got to bed.
Asleep.
It's fine. I'm a equal parent. I can do that. Right. But it's the knock on effects, right? Within a year after when she stopped drinking, she was, tucking our daughter was what, 2, 3 at the time in every night. They would spend an hour up there, talking, reading stories and whatever.
You were in a hurry to get back to your glass of wine.
You see all these places where what you had was fine, but there ended up being this other level of I don't know, happiness, contentment available.
I wasn't rushing down and trying to get my daughter to sleep so I could sit on the couch with another glass of wine.
Yeah. I get that. 100%.
So you had this almost new deliberateness, I guess, to the relationship, and there was, frankly, I guess, like more time and energy to spend on it, right? Where I knew, right, if I wanted to really get with her and get into something, it had to be about 8:00. Right after that, it was kind of hit or miss on whether or not it was going to be fully remembered in the morning. And that was probably my biggest thing I liked better, right? About
I was such a gray out, blackout drinker, pretty much always, not all the time, but often enough that he would sort of be like, we talked about this, and I would pretend, oh yeah, of course, try to like figure out what we had talked about, or are you messing with me? Did we talk about it? So all of that went away pretty quickly. And I had gone through enough back and forth and fighting, wanting to quit drinking, that pretty closely the last time I was like, yeah, I'm not going back. I'm going to use all my tools. I feel better. And when someone's happier, in the relationship and proud of themselves and more content, the whole relationship gets better.
Yeah.
And she looked better too.
There you go.
I mean, right? Like,
Yeah, I did.
There was that. That was good.
Mike, do you have a vice? What's your vice?
I'm not terribly into vices particular, right?
I go to work and do my job and show up and do the thing.
Yeah, right. I'm not not a particularly addictive personality I've found, right? Like, Casey, if she wants, she's going to do something, she's locked in on whatever that thing is. And I got a lot of other stuff going on, right? I got a job. We're trying to win a state title. I got a yard to take care of. That wasn't totally my bag.
We used to make jokes, my girlfriends and I, especially when you were in your 20s and 30s, we were like, it's nice to be Mike D, because he had the summers off when he was teaching 6th grade. He played baseball. He coached baseball and basketball. He went on fishing trips 2 or 3 times a year. And so I think that a lot of my drinking also, once we had kids, was my universe, for better or worse, kind of shrunk, where it was a family vacation or work or home. I realized after I quit drinking that was to some extent my fault and choice, meaning I became sort of a martyr about it.
Yeah.
And I remember after I stopped drinking, we had a 3-year-old and Mike was going on a fishing trip and I was in charge of both little kids and while working full time at a pretty big job. And I hadn't gone on a vacation without the kids and, however long we took family trips. And I was talking to my best friend and, complaining and a little bitter.
Yeah.
And she said to me, is it that you don't want Mike to be happy, or is it that you aren't happy? And I was man. Damn. So I was like, it is that I am not happy. And I had removed the alcohol and had a therapist and was like, all right, this is truth time. And I believe I pretty quickly booked a trip down to Santa Barbara with one of my friends. And it was amazing.
To which I said, that sounds good.
Yeah, of course. Like, he didn't want me to be a martyr. It was just, I was not advocating for myself. And so I started hiring a lot more babysitters, and because he was busy, like a lot of weekends, he was gone all day Saturday. And then he had a baseball game when his coaching was over. And, it felt like for a long time that everything that he wanted to do took precedence. He had a trip booked. He had XYZ. Everything was an annual event. And finally, I was like, you know what? I wanted my stuff. So I went on, recovery retreats to Salt Spring Island, BC, and slept in a yurt with my girlfriends and paid the money. 2 years ago, went to Provence with 4 girlfriends who were all sober. And, I just made myself happier, I think.
Yeah, I love that. I'm imagining that there are a lot of people, women in particular, who are listening to this and are going, I recognize myself. I recognize these sentences I have. So if they are, and they're like, hey, I want to do something about that. Like, Casey, where do you point them? What do you want them to know about you, or how you can help?
I mean, the first step, I think, is I have a podcast. It's called the Hello Someday Podcast for Sober, Curious Women. And it is all about exploring your relationship with alcohol and how to take a longer term break from it, and the benefits of not drinking and coping tools. And it's really geared towards a lot of my audience are pretty successful working moms who, like me, drank a lot to as their favorite reward, as their way to cope with their social circle, and really taking away a lot of the stigma between deciding not to drink, looking at it as a net positive and looking at it with curiosity and excitement, but also with tools. And so that is a great place to start. Zach is going to come on soon and talk about marriage and sobriety and tools to work on that. And so we do a lot around that and around like perfectionism and different responses and fears. So that's a great place to start. I also have a program. It's called the Sobriety Starter Kit. It's just for women. And, there's a community around it and coaching and all that good stuff.
Cool. Yeah. Well, I will make sure to point people in that direction. And I obviously am an advocate for taking your relationship with alcohol seriously. I think, Mike, you do have this sort of special benefit that it's not a thing you have to spend a lot of time thinking about and that's amazing. And, but if it's a thing in your life that you're struggling with, by all means, like take any step. And if Casey's podcast can help, then I will point you in that direction. And I get to come visit, hang out in a couple of weeks. And we'll see if we have something that we can offer people. So thank you both for coming on today and for just letting us inside your relationship. I have so many other questions about your kids and about your professional journey and all that other stuff, but I feel like we covered a lot of ground. So I'm grateful that you gave me some of your sunny Sunday afternoon.
Thank you so much.
Hey, nice to meet you.
Okay. Thank you, Casey and Mike D. It was really good to talk to you and to hear more of your story. Again, if you recognize your voice in their story, feel free to check out Casey's podcast, which is called the Hello Someday Podcast for Sober Curious Women. I'll remind you again to check out my blog, which is called StuffIWrite.com. Also, you can support Marriage Therapy Radio by joining our Patreon community, patreon.com/Marriage Therapy Radio, or just go to marriagetherapyradio.com and click on the Patreon link there. We're rolling out a couple of pretty cool new features over there, including an Ask Zach section. So if you have questions for me that I can't answer on the podcast because I'm interviewing couples, I am going to be answering them over at Patreon. I've already got a few of them ready to roll out thanks to some of your emails that have already come in. If you're looking for an app to help you stay connected, try Paired. You can go to paired.com/MTR. When you sign up using that code on the web, it gives us credit, which is always good for the podcast. Just looking for ways to help you, help us, help you, help others. But for now, I'll thank you for the time and attention you're putting into making your relationship better today than it was yesterday.